if success requires perfection on our behalf, I mean, we're already on our way to being a massive failure if that's how we're going to define it. So the way that I kind of look at it instead is like, if we can kind of reframe success as like the process of continually taking actions that put us closer to our stated goals, realizing that there's going to be bumps along the road, we're much more likely to get to those goals that we're setting for ourselves when we leave ourselves that wiggle room and be willing to cut ourselves some slack and realize that, hey, life happens and it's not going to go all according to plan.
The choices we make about how to earn, save, and spend our money all ultimately come down to how we think and feel about money and work. And whether or not you're quote unquote successful with your financial choices is all a matter of your perspective. So understanding and thinking about how you define success has a lot to do with whether or not you are satisfied or feel successful with your finances. I'm Susan Bowles, and you're listening to Break the Ceiling, the show where we break down unconventional strategies you can use to save time, boost your profit, and increase your operational capacity. If you live in the US, you live in a capitalist society that equates accumulation of money with success. The default assumption is that more money is better, and that success is accumulating as much money as you possibly can. But examining that definition of success and figuring out if that's your definition of success can be really powerful when it comes to handling your own finances, and can help shape your priorities and values that help define your own financial choices. And that's a lot of what my guest today does with his clients. Meet Brian Plain. Brian is an investment advisor representative with Gradient Advisors LLC, which is an SEC-registered investment advisory firm located in Arden Hills, Minnesota. And he helps clients figure out what to do with their finances and helps them figure out a plan to meet their financial goals. And a lot of that work means really examining what success means, what enough means. And recognizing that even with a good financial plan, as soon as you walk out the door with your plan, it'll change. But that doesn't mean you failed. Brian and I talk about how to examine your financial values and create your own definition of success and failure when it comes to your financial decisions. Hey, Brian, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, Susan. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I think a lot of people aren't necessarily familiar with what a certified financial planner is or where they kind of sit in that suite of financial support you might want in your business or your personal life. So can you give me kind of a quick summary of what you do and how you work with folks?
Sure. So I think when most people talk about a certified financial planner and what they might do differently is that we kind of take more of a bigger picture, kind of holistic look at people's finances and how that kind of interacts with their lives. So, I mean, that just kind of covers basically beyond investments. I think, again, when most people say financial, their head immediately goes to investments, but there's obviously a lot more than that. So whether that's, how much you keep in your cash cushion, insurance coverage, looking at your employee benefits, estate planning, insurance planning. I mean, basically just anything and everything that has to do with your financial well-being, I typically consider to be fair game. I always stop people and remind them that I'm not a CPA, I'm not an attorney, but I know those people. And I'm also not afraid of the answer to a question being, I don't know, but I'll find out for you. So yeah, that's I guess from a bigger picture standpoint, I mean, where I guess a certified financial planner kind of sits in the spectrum of financial advice and so forth. As to kind of who I specifically focus on, I work with Gen X families that want to live better, both kind of financially and emotionally. So I kind of like to sit in that area of that. I think there's enough articles probably out there on Roth IRA conversions. And frankly, I'm not an engineer, so your spreadsheets will always be better than mine. But where I really feel like I can add the most value and kind of help folks is kind of that money mindset focus of, how do we take this vehicle that is money and turn it into kind of living a good life, both now and in the future.
Yeah, I absolutely adore your email. It is one of my favorites. And a lot of what you write about talks about that money mindset and kind of reframing how you approach, think about your money and how you're using it, how you're budgeting around it. So do you see money mindset issues popping up in your work, and kind of what value do you see in investing and paying attention to our overall relationship with our money?
Yeah, so I see it a lot. And I think the value in it is that I think a lot of people don't always see that. I think it's very easy for folks to say, if we're talking about, whether it's financial planning or just, setting financial goals for yourself, it's easy just to focus on the numbers. So whether that's a certain amount in savings, whether that's a certain, income from your business, those are all, good goalposts to have. And I think obviously keep us motivated to, build in our businesses and kind of move forward. But they often lack meaning, I think, behind them. It's just, well, this is the next, goalpost to kind of hit. And then once you get there, it's like, well, then I'll be happy, and that seems to be the story that we continually tell ourselves, and we continue to move those goalposts and do it successfully. And it doesn't always translate into like, well, am I actually living a better life or the life I want to be living, as a result of kind of doing that. So yeah, I think, taking that money mindset approach is hugely helpful. A lot of times when I'm talking to people about it, it's the first time that they've really thought about it that way. But again, it kind of goes back to maybe what I mentioned earlier, which is just, money itself is really just a vehicle. And I mean, what we do with it can, obviously dictate whether we're living the life we want or we're not. So yeah, I think, bring that up as part of the equation. I think so many people sometimes just think of money from the technical side of things, but, really it's just, a thing that we can use to make our lives better. So yeah, it's a big part of kind of what I help people, realize through our work together is, how can we kind of reframe that?
And do you do that in any kind of structured way, or it just kind of comes up naturally? How do you knowing that for just about everybody, including people who have done money mindset work, it's always kind of something that is there. It's something in the background, and how you view and use money is always something. There's always something new and different to deal with. So how do you, is it kind of part of your process, or just kind of comes up naturally? How do you approach that?
Yeah, so it is part of my process, which then I think kind of has it come up more naturally. And some of that process is really that what I like to tell people is like, rather than saying that we're going to put together this financial plan, my issue with kind of the, I guess, standard issue financial plan has always been like, okay, this is great. Like you just spent, thousands of dollars. You've put together a plan that lays out the next 30 years of your lives. You walk out the office door, you're feeling good about yourself, and you fall down and subsequently break your arm, and now you're out of work for like 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And like this, you now have this paper document that is now basically worthless because it's completely changed the second. So I mean, the only thing we know when you do a financial plan is that we're not going to get it right. So I mean, that's really the only thing you can know with any certainty. So the way I prefer to approach it is, look, our goal here is not to build this, really elaborate thing that, has to be redone every time something changes in our lives. Instead, it's like, let's build out this flexible framework that acknowledges the fact, right, that life is going to change. And like, that's the thing that we know for certain. So I think when we're able to do that, it really allows a lot of space for kind of that money mindset to kind of come into it, of that, different people think about things differently when it comes to money. And I mean, nowhere is that more true than when we're talking about, a couple that's together and brings two separate, money mindsets to it. So a lot of the work we're often doing is, again, how we can kind of blend those together, where, someone may be, more emotional when it comes to money, and like that kind of drives their decision-making process. And there may be some people, I don't know, maybe like someone who is also on this podcast with me, who might take a money first approach to those things. And how do we kind of blend those two when, you're trying to coexist together and make money work for both of you?
Yeah, it's so funny because when my husband and I got married, we didn't necessarily have like different mindsets about money. We were both kind of along the same, like mostly saver kind of values. Mm-hmm. But what was really interesting was we decided who was going to control the finances based on who had more of an emotional need to control the finances. Like I could not be in control of it. Like it stressed me out so much to not be in control of it. And he was like, yeah, I can do it, but I don't care. And that's how we ended up making the decision about like who makes financial decisions, is who emotionally can't not make the decisions.
There might be a similarity in my household too, as well, Susan. Believe it or not. Yeah.
He's like, yeah, totally capable, but also I don't care, and you do. Yeah. So let's kind of talk a little bit about one aspect of money mindset, kind of the success and failure. We all want to be quote unquote successful with our money. We want to be making smart choices, making good decisions. And at least in my work, though, very few people are actually confident that they are making good choices or that they're being successful, even if that's not necessarily true. So is that true for you as well? And, if so, why do you think that is?
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I mean, maybe to start with the latter part of your question, I mean, the reason I think that it is when when you haven't kind of established what you view as success and really kind of gone through that process of really kind of defining that, the default is to look externally. So I think it's just, again, getting back to that analogy of kind of moving the goalpost, it's so easy to, have what, if you told yourself of 5 years ago, would be a massive success to kind of equate to where you're at right now. If that's great, but really what you're looking at the person that's like 5 years ahead of you and saying like, but I have so far to go. And both of those things can be true at the same time. So I think, again, in terms of kind of like how we view success, I think the more that we can look inward to kind of create that definition, the more satisfied we start to come, and the more we're able, I think most importantly, to kind of enjoy the journey of success, because again, there's really not a finish line to it. And again, I think for certain people that are just, again, going to be entrepreneurial motivated to begin with, I mean, the people that are successful at it, I mean, they're never looking backwards, right? It's always like, what's next? And again, sometimes, part of my process is just to kind of slow people down and, again, not rest on your laurels, but really just take a look back to say, hey, let's take a minute here and just acknowledge like all that you've overcome, all that you've accomplished. And that doesn't mean that, you're not going to still continue to work hard to grow from there. But again, just part of, I think, success is being able to, enjoy it as a journey, as opposed to like it's this some fictional, destination that we'll one day reach and, just be massively happy for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been reading The Psychology of Money, which you had recommended to me, and I ironically had been like just delivered the day that you were like, hey, you should read this. And one of the things that's really been sticking out for me is that Morgan, the author, says the hardest thing when it comes to money is to get the goalposts to stop moving. And that felt so really true, is that really the hardest thing when it comes to money is not figuring out how to use it or, what a good, smart choice would be. It's really to figure out, where is the goalpost, and then get it to not be comparing to everybody else and people that are 5 years ahead of you, and to kind of just release that idea that in our society, we equate success generally with money, right. The accumulation of money, whether that's true or not. And being able to detach that is one of the kind of most challenging things that we have to do when we're learning how to handle and deal with money.
For sure. And I think one of the things I know we're going to kind of talk a little bit about as well, too, is kind of, again, the amount of space there is kind of between a massive success and kind of a complete failure. I think the same thing holds true when you talk about kind of moving the goalposts. It's like, we either say that like we're going to continue to move them completely down the field 5 years ahead of where we are, or we're going to like try and make them stop. And like, again, it's the same thing. It's like, well, like with most things, there's a happy medium there, right? It's like, it's not to say that, okay, because we've reached a point where we feel like we now quote unquote have enough, and we've kind of done the planning work to feel like we can see why that is enough for us. And that, again, earning more money beyond that isn't necessarily going to, increase our livelihood or our level of happiness. I mean, frankly, sometimes it might even, add more stressors to our lives when we really look at it that we don't necessarily want to do. Just having that picture allows us to be more intentional. So again, I think it's that, the goalposts maybe never stop moving, but certainly sometimes, it probably would be smart of us to slow them down and move them more purposefully, as opposed to just like, well, we've checked this box and this is the next one that we're supposed to check according to, again, the people that are in, quote unquote in front of me that I've decided to compare myself to.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of parallels to business ownership too. The trope is that we're all supposed to be growing our business, and that's the goal, is that there's never an end. There's never a point at which we're not supposed to be growing. And sometimes it's taking a step back and saying, I'm making a conscious choice that this is the size of the company I want to grow, and I will make other choices, but I'm not growing just for the sake of growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think it's one of those, again, it's like if you've only looked outwardly, to define your definition of success when it comes to your business, that's the process, right? It's like you just continue to grow. And, at some point, and again, I say this as someone who, again, as admitted, solopreneur, I've structured my business in that so that I can stay that way as purposely as possible. Sometimes it's the constraints that we put in place that allow our businesses, I think, to really shine. Because again, it takes so many of those options off the table. And most importantly, I think it prevents us from creating a business that essentially looks like the job that, we escaped and why we left to go create that business in the first place. It's like, I don't think it was, that people got into business to be, that miserable middle manager that, they tried to escape it. And now that they feel like, that maybe that's one of like 6 roles that they fill in their company, as opposed to like, that's the role they escaped. And at least that point, they were only filling one role and they got to go home at night and not have to worry about it as much. So yeah, I think just, again, being that, purposeful about the growth of your business, or when you're at a point where, its growth is now not the primary goal. Maybe now the primary goal is, really to just work with people that you really enjoy working with. And maybe that involves, cutting back some places, or just, making changes to your business so that you can do that.
It's that time of year. Time to set some new goals or consider your New Year's resolution. And if you're like a lot of business owners I know, you might be thinking that this is the year you're gonna get your shit together when it comes to your money. You're gonna start reviewing that P&L statement you get every month. You're gonna be more intentional about how you spend and closely tracking the ROI you're getting. You're gonna get clear on exactly how you're making money and how you can make more of it without working yourself into the ground. Now, if you're both nodding your head and feeling the anxiety rise in your chest as I describe these financial goals, I see you. We all have the best of intentions about how we're going to manage our business finances. But few people actually follow through on learning how to manage their business's money or execute the financial plans they create. You want to feel like you're on top of your money stuff, but it's tough to climb over all the questions and reports and bank accounts and spreadsheets. That's where I come in. I help you think like a CFO. Working together, you'll learn the skills you need to confidently make database decisions about how to spend your money and how to structure your business so you make more. You'll build a more resilient business that's efficient and easy to run. And you'll create meaningful financial processes so you're never caught with your pants down again. Think Like a CFO is a 6-month accelerator, online workshop, and coaching program that will teach you to think about your business like a CFO would. We'll cover 6 core topics, including risk and resilience, investing in your business, scaling sustainably, and your relationship with money. You'll also get dedicated implementation time and live support so you don't get stuck on the details or the execution. And you'll get a clear path to true small business financial literacy so you can connect your money to every other aspect of your work, from daily operations to long vacations. Think Like a CFO is enrolling right now, and when you register before December 31st, you'll also get my course, Not Rocket Finance, which is the perfect primer for Think Like a CFO. To find out more about Think Like a CFO and finally get your business shit together, go to scalespark.co/CFO. All right, so you brought up failure when we were talking about success, and I want to dig a little bit deeper into that. So, maybe the flip side of success is failure, maybe. But you wrote a really great email the other week talking about kind of reframing how we approach failures. So can you tell me a little bit more about that and what your approach is there?
Sure. And I mean, I should point out all of these blog posts and emails I write are basically just reminders to myself that I basically share with other people. And again, I think that's that concept that we talked about a little bit before of like, just that there's a lot of space between being a massive success and a complete failure. The example I used, and, I hinted at the end of the blog post that I was referring to myself in this, with quarantine and so forth, I've, some of the things I usually like to do to kind of get my exercise and work out just haven't been possible right now. So I took it upon myself to do one of those 30-day yoga challenges. It was cooking, got to day 8, doing well, had some accountability from some people. Day 9, fell asleep on the couch, woke up, decided to eat some ice cream instead of, doing my yoga routine that evening. And now, quote unquote, I have failed, right? And again, my reframe really there is, well, did I, for 8 days in a row, I did a yoga program that I previously was not doing at all, but again, because I did not immediately hit my goal of, doing 30 days successfully, it's easy for me to say like, well, I can just kind of bag it and say, well, that was a good effort, Bri, but you obviously failed at that. So I think, again, that's where I kind of go to reframing success of just there being, a lot of space between being a complete failure and a massive success. Is that, again, I made a lot of progress in that period of time, and there's nothing that stops me from, getting up the next day and just kind of picking up where I left off. So I think that's, where we get ourselves in trouble when it comes to if success requires perfection on our behalf. I mean, we're already on our way to, being a massive failure if that's how we're going to define it. So the way that I kind of look at it instead is like, if we can kind of reframe success as like the process of continually taking actions that put us closer to our stated goals, realizing that there's going to be bumps along the road, we're much more likely to kind of, get to those goals that we're setting for ourselves when we leave ourselves kind of that wiggle room and be willing to cut ourselves some slack and realize that, hey, life happens and it's not going to go, all according to plan.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. I mentioned this before we got on the call, but you and I were both in a virtual co-working group a couple of years ago. That's how we met. And there was a question posted in the forum asking people how they approached failure and whether or not they, how did they view failure? And some people viewed failure as there's not really any failure. It's all just data, it's information, it's, something was successful. And then there were the people that when things didn't go according to plan, just really focused on the fact that it was a failure. And I think that that's a great analogy here is, sometimes things don't go well, in business, in money, in life, things never go according to exactly how you planned them. And a lot of it has to do with how you approach and think about that failure. For me, I'm one of those people that, yeah, stuff may not have gone exactly according to what I wanted. There were certainly some wins. There were some maybe not so great moments. But for me, it's all just data to help me make better choices the next time around. And so I would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, again, I can provide a point in comparison there of that I was probably in the latter category of that I was the person that, again, like if I didn't achieve that, like I was a failure. And not from the standpoint of like I was going to beat myself up and not get out of bed for like 5 days once, I have that failure happen, but more from the standpoint of like, for me, it was like anything that didn't mean reaching what I was. If I was to view that I would view that as a failure because to do anything else would just be an excuse. So part of, this was me kind of, again, giving up that sense of control that, shocking as a financial planner, I seek, that sense of control over so many things that really I can't control. And just realizing that like, what I can control are the actions that I put into everything. I don't necessarily always control the outcomes, but I can control, again, the actions that I'm kind of putting into it. So I think I offer that just as a way for folks who, say like, well, it's too late for me or too late for my business. Like I'm already just wired this way. I do think it's something that, again, you can have a natural inclination to be one way or the other as it comes to that, but you can, I think, get better. Again, the example I always provide is that like, we always want to go from A to Z of like, we want to go from being the person that just views any failure as like, this is a data point, as you mentioned, and we can, get better at it. We can, just use it to kind of do it. Or, like the example that I provided of myself where it's like, no, if I don't reach exactly what I said, I'm a failure. Again, you don't have to go from A to Z to flip from, one area to another. There's a lot of space in between. You just got to kind of plug away and work at it.
Yeah, I think I love that. So is there anything you think we should talk about that we haven't touched on already?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the only other thing maybe I'd add just to kind of, sticking with our kind of money mindset topic here is I think it's whether it's personally or in your business. It's just that, again, I think the process of whether it's getting your finances in order for your business, getting your finances in order for, your personal life. I think a lot of times people look at that and they just think like, oh, this is just such an overwhelming process, or this is going to, limit me so much. And, I need that freedom, especially again, for the entrepreneur who's starting their, has their own business and it's established. And it's like, I don't want somebody else to tell me the way to do it. And I guess what I would say is, again, just kind of to provide a reframe around that. I mean, I know from the work that you do, Susan, and then again, from the work that I do with people on the personal side, the goal here is actually to empower you. And again, I think that's the commonality that I hear of people who kind of go through, whether it's your process or my process. It's like, when you get to know your numbers and to know, what those numbers allow you to do, you realize it's, any restrictions that are put in place are actually tend to be freeing ones of that. Again, it's that artificial restriction that you can put in place that allows that to no longer be an option and reduces your options. That actually kind of grants you the freedom that, maybe you feel like you should have in the first place now. So again, I guess that's the only only other thing I would agree is that, or point out is that I think there are certain things that, it's easy to view them as like, these are constraints and these are going to restrict my freedom. But sometimes it's those constraints that we put in place that I think actually allow us the freedom to kind of do the things we want, both in our life and our businesses.
Yeah, I love that. I think, a lot of the reason that people shy away from paying attention and learning, how to make different choices with their money is, there's a lot of shame and guilt and fear that we're not doing it the right way. And I think I loved the word empower that you used, is that being more aware of what's going on, understanding what's happening is empowering, and it allows you to make choices. You're making conscious choices about where you want to spend your money and what you want to do with it, versus kind of sticking your head in the sand and ignoring it and feeling all of that like emotional pent up, like I should be doing something. And when you actually, take a breath and take a few steps to even just little baby steps towards having a better understanding of what's happening, I think there's so much emotional release and freedom that comes with that knowledge, the freedom that comes with understanding what's happening with your finances. And I think, at least in the work that I've done with people, it is really empowering that all of a sudden you feel like you are empowered to make choices that matter to you, that are important to you.
For sure. And I think that's one of those things too, where again, the conception is like, oh, well, if I work with Susan or Brian, they're just going to tell me what I have to do. And it's like, well, yes and no. I mean, we're going to show you, here are ways in which, you can do things that, again, go back to your word of empower you to make kind of choices. But, I always say to people, look, I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. I'm here to hear from you, what's important to you, take all of the competing priorities you have and help you come up with, a plan of attack that, feels like, that you can feel good about, not only right now, but kind of where you're headed in the future based on those choices you're making. So it's not, me saying like, nope, you can't do that. Yes, you can do this. I mean, this is your life. This is your plan. But again, we want to do it in a way that empowers you to take, all of these kind of seemingly, individual decisions and just kind of showing you kind of how, when you blend them all together to make sense of them so that you can, again, go back to kind of creating that flexible framework so that every time a new thing presents itself, it's not just like, okay, you throw your hands up in the air and you're completely back to where you started. It's like, okay, we kind of planned for this. We knew that, things wouldn't necessarily go according to plan, but we're not starting from scratch. It's like, we're just at an area where, again, we can return to, the books, we can return to kind of your overall, flexible framework and really just look at like, one, did this really change anything? And two, if it did, here are the different choices you can make about how you kind of want to move forward. And I think, again, that's a very empowering thing once you have that in place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a perfect place to wrap up on. So where can our listeners find you if they want to connect or learn more about what you do?
Sure. So the best spot would probably be my website, and that's just brianplain.com. That's BRIANPLAIN.com. And on there, again, Susan referenced my email. So I send out every 2 weeks an email to clients, people who sign up for my list, which basically just kind of shares, my most recent blog posts. You can also, again, check out my blog on there. I also record all my blog posts as audio articles as well, too. So if you want to go to my site and, subscribe to those there as well, too, you can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Brian. This was so great. The point of examining your financial mindset, values, and experiences isn't to shame you or to make you feel bad for stuff you haven't done yet or financial choices you made that didn't pan out. Ultimately, understanding your finances, whether that's personal or business, is all about empowering you to make choices that are based on your definitions of success, your definition of what enough is. So I want you to take some actions for me. First, take 10 minutes and write down what enough means to you. That can be a number or maybe even just a feeling. Second, write down what your definition of success is when it comes to your money. And again, that could be a number, a feeling, or just a description. And if you're up for it, I'd love for you to share it with me. Either tag me or DM me on Twitter at @TheSusanBowles. Break the Ceiling is produced by Yellow House Media. Our executive producer is Sean McMullen. Our production coordinator is Lou Blazer. This episode was edited by Marty Seefeld with production assistance by Kristen Runbeck.